Yeah. The Black Fundraisers Podcast. This lock right here. What up, Kia?
CH at lock 121.
Get the check out like a physical. We get the checks and the Cheerios. Counting like chocolate cereal. We need the fun and residuals. We get the money and flip it, cause we gotta get it. We talking finances, funding and grant biz. Getting and making advances, taking chances with the hot topics. Racism, politics, non-profits. Kia Kroon, she gon' drop knowledge. Whatever you want, the pod got it. Get your facts right. Deep dive and get baptized. Black business, black life, black money, black power, black pride. And the POCs tryna see those fees like a casino. Sitting on TOP, we just spitting our POV. We gon' ride till we on E. We pushing the pedal, we over the limit. We never gon' settle, we been with the business. Every episode is gon' be the realest. Every week you gotta pay us a visit. Come on and hang, hot as a flame. Hating is lame, taking the aim. Changing the game, stay in our lane. Breaking the chain, making it rain. Making it hurricane. Kia Kroon, now you heard the name. The Black Fundraisers Podcast, that's on everything.
Hello, good people out there. It's your favorite fundraiser, Kia Kroon. And I am so thrilled to be back. Yes, back like we never left. Same theme music. Hope you like it. And I'm just thrilled to be here. A topic which I think is very apropos for these times, and a guest which is apropos for this time. It is my pleasure to introduce some, and not others, who know this beautiful lady. Dear sister friend, Sarah Jane Foreman. Sarah Jane is an attorney, and she works in the space of education. And it is my pleasure to introduce her to the Black Fundraisers Podcast. Welcome, Sarah Jane.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kia. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, I couldn't think of a better guest as we kick off our 4th season of the Black Fundraisers Podcast. Let's give it up for that, our 4th season. And actually, when I started the Black Fundraisers Podcast, Sarah Jane and I were working together, and it was just one of those things that I got an inclination to do, and I've been doing it ever since. So shout out to the Black Fundraisers Podcast. Shout out to you out there who continue to continue to support us with your viewership and your listenership. So Miss Sarah Jane, I'm going to tell the good people out there what happened about a week or so ago. I was feeling the weight of some of the executive orders that had come down. Recall that was a flurry, child, a flurry.
Yep.
And, I took to social media and just posted from my heart, as I always do. And, I just simply said to people, I see you, and my thoughts are with you, whether you identify as trans, whether you are, whoever you might be, if you are a DEI professional that is now in the market for a job, right? We know that has happened. We know that was happening before the executive orders. Truth be told, people have been kicked out on their keister with some of these corporate strategy realignments and divestments from equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I posted this post, and you commented so thoughtfully and eloquently, and, had a message for the good folks out there. And I would like for us to just have an organic conversation about that message. Do you remember what you said in response to my post?
I don't exactly remember. I may have said something like Trump is not the king or something like that, that these executive orders are not the law, because there's been a flurry of executive orders, and every time one comes out, it seems like everybody's kind of reacting. And I wanted to remind people that that is intentional, right? So it's
absolutely,
it's not the law. So we need to be focused on that. And maybe something around staying calm, because I think that is very important, to stay calm and keep calm and carry on, keep doing what we're doing, because a lot of this that we're seeing is bluster. There's a lot of important things that are actually happening. We should talk about that. But a lot of this is strategy to distract us. And so our focus is one of the most, I think, important things we can bring right now as a form of resistance, is our focus.
Absolutely. And yes, let's talk about the things. And I love keep calm and carry on.
Yeah.
I think that is the message. Keep calm and carry on. But let's chit chat. So there were, I believe it was over 100 executive orders that came out on, what was that? Was it day one, day two?
Day one.
What day one? There was this flurry. And I mean, I felt I didn't even watch the news that day. I did not watch the inauguration. And I'm going to tell you why before we get into this rich discussion. I shared with Sarah Jane that I have very visceral memories of what the 1.0 administration, Trump administration, did to me. Mm-hmm. I feel like it stole moments from me that I can never get back. I had a kid in high school. I feel like there were days when I should have been celebrating whatever, not to say that I didn't celebrate and honor my baby if his baseball or football team won. But there were those moments when I allowed things that were coming out of the White House to steal a little bit of my joy. And being a woman of a certain age now, I'll be 44 the end of this month. I just have decided as part of my healing journey that I don't owe anybody that, to take joy for me, and that for the sake of my mental wellness, it's best that I get my news in other ways, right? I'm filtering my news and leaning into news outlets that are not as sensational or salacious, and where the animus behind what is happening isn't so apparent and visible, although it's very, very clear where this comes from, right? Vitriol and animus. It's just more than my spirit and soul can really shoulder right now as a Black woman that is trying my damnedest to prioritize my joy, my healing, my wellness, so that I can show up as who I need to show up in the marketplace.
Yep. Yeah. I think that is a point that is well taken, and a lot of people are experiencing this overwhelming sensation, which again is part of a very specific strategy that this administration is deploying and has deployed in the past to overwhelm us. So I think not watching news is a good strategy, as long as you have a sort of trusted source for summarizing that news.
Absolutely. So
it's important to be informed, but that doesn't mean you have to watch the news. So you can find resources that are summarizing the news that you trust, and just getting information from those sources, as opposed to constantly refreshing your browser, because it's always going to be something. And our peace is very important right now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially the 92%.
Yes.
Everyone, yes. But especially the 92%. Yes. I'm standing on what I said, right? When you think about the strategy that is being employed, the agenda, like you said, very deliberate, very intentional. You feel like you're getting slapped silly every which way but loose. I mean, boom, 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 boom. Those orders came down, and everyone that I know, there was something for everybody. It was like a buffet. There was something that impacted everyone. If you are a person who relies on insulin, or maybe you don't, maybe your mother does or your grandmother does, and you'd seen your grandmother not having affordability of her medications being an issue, and now you're kind of concerned, like, could that be an issue? Am I going to have to pick up the bill for her insulin because I don't want this to be prohibitive from her, this rollback around, affordability of certain medications,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
There was something that impacted everybody, but I want to go back and talk specifically about this particular executive order, which posed implications for folks like me in the line of work in the social services sector or the third sector. Can you talk a little bit about the executive order, which we know has now been rescinded, right? If you could talk a little bit about that, and even its rescinding, to give a little context to the viewers.
Yes, and I don't have the exact number of the executive orders. There have been many, many orders. There are some resources I can share with you afterwards that I've been using to track the executive orders. There's some websites that you can go to that track particularly the litigation, because there's a lot of litigation going on around these orders, which is something that I would like to talk about as well. But the particular executive order at issue that you're talking about had to do with grant funding. And that was a day that a lot of us who are in the social sector, it was a lot going on, and I'm a lawyer for an organization, a nonprofit organization. So everybody was calling me, wanting to know what's going on, and I didn't have the answers in that moment other than knowing that we should remain focused and calm and really understand what's actually going on here. So the first thing that I think is important to know about that executive order, it has been rescinded, but the first thing to know about it is that it was directed towards discretionary federal funds. So I think people heard grants and funds.
Oh, that was all they needed to hear.
And that's all they heard. And so it was suddenly like, I was getting calls from people like, does this mean that? And it didn't. Most of the funds that, at least that my organization relies on, are formula grants, right? They're formulaic. So that was not touched. It didn't involve those kinds of grants. So now other organizations, smaller nonprofits, may be dependent on discretionary federal funds, but it wasn't like every single grant that the federal government was ever going to disperse was impacted by this order. So that was the first thing. It was narrow to begin with. And then it was only federal funds. So many smaller nonprofit organizations are relying on a mixture of funding sources. So you're talking about local funds that would not be affected by this order. You're talking about philanthropic dollars from foundations, those kinds of things that would not be affected by this order. Now, to the extent that those entities are funded by federal discretionary funds, there could have been a downstream impact. And there was a lawsuit that was filed that same day. The court in that case issued a temporary injunction against the federal government, preventing them from doing anything related to the executive order. And there was going to be a follow-up hearing that next week. And in that span of time between the court issuing the injunction and the follow-up hearing, the administration actually rescinded the order altogether. So I think what that whole few days showed was that remaining calm is a good strategy, because everyone was so worked up that day. And what did it get us if we were super worked up on that day? Really just losing our own inner peace.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, the strategy, which was, okay, let's see what this order really relates to. Let's challenge it through legal means, was effective because the administration then rolled it back. So I think it also shows that advocacy is important, that as a community, we can come together and fight some of these things through the rule of law, which still exists in this country. One of the comments I made to your post was that Trump is not the king. He's not the emperor. So these executive orders don't have the force of law because he does not have the authority under the Constitution to change the law as the executive. That is not what his constitutional authority is. So these executive orders sound like these mandates coming from on high, which is what like a king might do, but he doesn't actually have that authority. So, you know, a lot of the stuff he's doing is illegal and he knows it. And again, it's not even meant to have any effect. It's meant to be distracting. It's meant to signal to his constituents that he's like doing something. And in fact, things don't have that much legal effect at the end of the day. As the executive, what his constitutional authority is to execute the law. So the legislature makes the law. That's the Congress, the House and the Senate. A lot of the things that they are attacking, like, for example, in my space in education, there's been a lot of conversation around Title IX, which is a law that protects a lot of different things, sexual harassment, sexual discrimination in educational institutions. Title IX is still the law. It's a law. The president, with his pen, cannot rescind Title IX. There are regulations that the Department of Education has issued related to how Title IX will be enforced. The president has a little more authority over how that piece because he is the executive. So he's going to say, agency that enforces, I want you to enforce it in this way. That he can do, but he cannot change the law itself. And so I think it's also important to understand those distinctions. This is an area where there's going to be a lot of litigation. And we've already seen that. There's also a litigation tracker that I've been keeping track of that lists kind of all of the lawsuits related to these executive orders because they've all been challenged. And so I think that's also important for people to know that we're not helpless, that there are organizations, there are entities that are taking action to directly challenge many of these orders. And even if we're not lawyers, there's a lot that we can do in terms of calling our representatives. Phone calls are very effective.
Okay.
And not letter writing and not these online petitions. Those are not quite as effective. But if you call your senator or you call your House of Representatives representative, that will get their attention. And so you could spend 5 minutes every day when you get home from work with a glass of wine, just making some phone calls. That will make a difference. So there's things we can do to, I think, reclaim some of the narrative. There's a book by Adrienne Marie Brown that I really love called Emergent Strategy that I'm sure some of your listeners have heard of. And one of the things she talks about in that book is this concept of small is all, sort of the power of micro shifting. Way that small intentional actions can lead to transformative change.
I like that. You know, I want to ask you for that when you share the resource list. Good people, I'm going to share some resources from Sarah Jane, including this particular book, because that sounds really, really amazing.
Yes, it's a book about movement building and sort of organizational strategy, but I think it has a really good message for these times because we do need to be organized right now. Absolutely. And we do need to be adaptive. And when you look at the world, change is part of the world around us. Everything changes. And so we're experiencing a season of significant change in this country, but that doesn't mean we have to despair.
Absolutely.
And especially as people of color, I think, and Black people in America in particular, you know, we have risen like phoenixes from the ashes before. Absolutely. Many of these institutions weren't our institutions anyway. And so I think there is actually space for us to say, let's control this narrative here. We don't have to be panicked. We don't have to be running around urgently. We can act with intention in our lives. And those small acts of intention are going to create ripples that affect everything around us. And that is completely in our control. I think remembering that we have choice, everything is a choice. So when we wake up, we can choose what we want to do with our day, how we want to approach something. I could sit here and be ridden with anxiety and stress and be watching the news and just letting this like paralyze me. Or I could like put on Kendrick Lamar's halftime show and dance around my living room and have a completely different day.
Hello.
I can choose what I want to do. You know, there's a lot of things that are out of my locus of control. It's important to recognize that, but there's a lot of things every day that we can choose. And I think being intentional in our choices is really, really important right now.
No, I agree. And there's so many nuggets that are a part of what you just shared. As I said, the information that you share with me, I'm going to share with the good people listening out there. I'll put them in the show notes. I'll append social post of our discussion. The choice to keep calm, just the choice, right? Is very, very powerful. And like I said at the start of this episode, I've made a decision not to allow what happens in the White House in the course of any given day to steal my joy. I have fought too long and hard from it. I've come up from too many things, as some of the viewers and listeners have. You've come up against generational poverty. You've come up against intimate partner violence. You've come up against illness in your body. People have gone through things, and knowing that you've survived those things and being able to put in perspective, you know what? This joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. The world isn't going to take it from me. I'm not allowing for any more stolen moments out of my life. My son is in high school. When you and I met, he's in college. When you and I met, he was in high school. And I was working on a star trying to figure out how I was going to get him through college debt free, because I've had Sally Mae call in about student loans and stuff like that before. He's now in college, and God is so good that I've been able to pay his tuition every semester. He's in his second semester of his sophomore year now. I'm not going to allow the things of this world, out of that entity, to steal my joy. It is incredibly important to me as I'm on a journey to heal and unlearn and learn some new things, right? So I think that is a wonderful, wonderful message. And, the other part of what you said about just that choice, I just want to hang out there. It's so important. Right. The fact that Black people, this isn't new to us. We have had to work around systems and outside of systems since the beginning of forever. That is what Black folks have historically done. And it's something that we've done, especially when the chips were down, and we've made tremendous strides and progress in a lot of respects. And I don't want to undermine the power and, authority that's welded in that, right? I want to honor that. So thank you for reminding us that we have a choice here, and thank you for enlightening folks, because like I said, I've piped out of news, and I've got a couple of outlets that are working for me. Forgive me, sometimes I'm a little bit late because, again, I'm not blasting the news in my house throughout my work day like some people are, or listening to it while I'm working. I can't allow that energy, as I'm coaching people on fundraising strategies and, encouraging people. I can't do that if I'm operating out of a empty cup. Right?
Absolutely. And I think that, the piece that we have, like, it is energetic. Life is energetic. And so that energy of things that end up in our mind, the speed of thought is much faster than the speed of other things. And so how our minds are, what we are thinking about is really important. And so keeping that space in your mind for the positive thoughts. Ours is an inheritance of abundance. I think that's relevant to you as a fundraiser. Ours is we do not come from an inheritance of fear. That is not my inheritance.
No.
And so I reject that. That may be somebody else's.
Don't listen. You gonna make me, because I'll do it. You know me, Sarah. I'll do it. I'll make a joyful noise.
Yeah.
I will make a joyful noise. That was a whole word. And I didn't, and I will always make a joyful noise. No, you're right. And having that abundance mindset, I know that it sounds kind of cliche, because a few people have picked that up and used it for some darkness that I'm not even going to talk about. But having an abundant mindset, it's not just about having wealth and means. It's about having that perspective and knowing that, listen, my cup is not empty. You know what I'm saying? Even when it's half empty by somebody's estimation, I'm working really hard, and I'm not afraid to acknowledge that I'm working at it, because you don't always feel like it's a full cup. You have days when, or I have days when I have to remind myself that it's a half full cup. You know what I'm saying? Instead of a half empty cup, and that the balance that's needed for a full cup is on the way. You know what I'm saying? Yes. So no, I appreciate that. And is there anything else you wanted to share? I know you mentioned you wanted to talk about some of the litigation, or did you cover that?
We covered it. I mean, I think the important point is to know that it's easy to be reactive, to hear and these headlines and these news outlets, it's almost clickbait at this point, right? They want you to click, oh, what did he do? So many of these things are just the issuing of the executive order is not the beginning or the end of it. First of all, it's not the beginning because it's already been written down in Project 2025. So we actually already have a playbook. If you want to know what's about to come, it's already been written down. So it's not the beginning of it. It's not the end of it, because half of the stuff is, again, unconstitutional or illegal or highly questionable at best, and is going to be challenged legally. So there is a lot of litigation going on right now. And so just because there's been an order that says something that frightens you doesn't mean that that's where it ends. It means that it's probably going to go to court. There's going to be judges that decide on it. We don't have the most favorable Supreme Court right now, but the amount of litigation that's going to go on, it's going to take a long time. So there will be time in terms of how the strategy plays out here, so I think that that's the main point I want to make on the litigation piece, is that it's happening, and folks need to know that, because you might hear that this executive order got released. You might not hear about the litigation that was filed the next day.
Exactly. You might not. And what you're surfacing is really, really important. And this is a message, good people, that I'm going to continue to reiterate. This is probably going to be the only time that I even mention this president's name, is in this episode. I just can't give a whole lot of life to it. Am I living in denial? Or some would say, no, I'm not. I'm choosing.
You're choosing
what I want to give my time and attention and words to. And that is not an individual that I want to, that I associate with speaking life or giving life to anything, although he considers himself very pro-life, okay. That's as much as you're never going to hear me mention that individual's name again outside of this episode. Well, I'm going to at least try.
I refer to him as like the Cheeto, or
anything, but I just don't have it. I acknowledge that I was a different person. I was a different version of myself. I don't want to say a different person. I was a different version of myself during the 1.0 than I am during the 2.0. I'm wise enough to know that this thing called peace, that is so important to me right now, is more important to me than something coming out of that office in the way of an executive order. I can't give what I gave the first go around. No, I can't do that again.
Well, I'm going to say a couple of things to that, Kia. I'm going to say, first of all, one thing that has, I thought this came to me during the election, when the election happened, and everybody was very upset. I was the next day. It was a difficult day.
Oh, I'll never forget that day.
But I thought, you know what? Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, because if this is what is wanted, you know, this is because what you're right, abundance is not about physical wealth. That's not actually what it's about. Joy is a renewable resource. It's about renewable resources. Money is not a renewable. I mean, money is like, it's not even barely a resource. It's like a idea that someone came up with, and it's kind of like governing things right now. But it doesn't have a connection to the unlimited potential that we all have inside of ourselves as human beings. That's what abundance is, right? It's our source, whatever your connection to the source is, right? People call it different things, but there is a limitless potential that we all have inside of us. And it is a potential for joy. It is a potential for love. That is true abundance. That's true abundance. And so it's nice to have the material things. And often there is a connection, because when you are in that mindset and you are making those choices for your life, then other things are going to flow along with that. But there is this, you know, what's happening, this hierarchical structure of this country that we're in, what's happening up at that top level, that doesn't, much of what's going on there doesn't impact me. You know, I think we need to be thinking about how are we adaptable. Our adaptability is something that we know we have, because our creative potential, that also is part of our abundance, is our creativity. And so we can organize our lives to have like shared leadership and distributive decision making and all of the things that reflect the way we want to live, that don't have anything to do with what's going on, you know, up at the in the White House, you know. So
Absolutely.
I think that's what we have. We have that abundance in ourselves.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming through with this word. The title of this episode is called Stay Encouraged Amid the BS, right? And
Yes.
that is exactly what you've given us our marching orders for doing that. And the reason I like this so much is because you are someone who isn't just looking in on this space, the nonprofit and education and philanthropy space. You breathe that air too. You know what I'm saying? It's easy to say to people who just lost their home, you know, which I think is reprehensible. You have people saying, oh, well, you know, look on the bright side, you're alive and you done lost your stuff. You know what I'm saying? You don't know what that feels like. You know what it feels like when, you know, an organization is at risk of losing some vital funding tied to, you know, its mission and its work. You know, you're not someone on the outside looking in. And someone with a legal services background, you know, we're hearing from someone who knows this, right? Who has lived experience in this space, like, yo, keep calm and carry on. And that is such an important message. And I want to thank you for coming through with that message, Miss Sarah Jane. And as a token of my appreciation, and because this episode is being brought to you by Etutu Apothecary and Tea Room, my latest venture, and I don't even want to, I feel like I'm kind of trivializing it. It's more than a venture. I opened the doors to my apothecary on December 9th, after 2 years of building it and 2 years of formulating tea blends and recipes and sourcing herbs from, you know, interesting places, some domestic, some abroad, like in places like St. Lucia, in places like Barbados, Belize, which I know you're from Belize, and creating these wonderful tea infusions and decoctions. And I wish you could smell this. You know, just as a thoughtful token, I am gifting you our sweet potato pie bliss tea.
Yes.
Loose leaf, which just dropped this month in celebration of Black History Month, because we're never canceled.
I love it. I think it's wonderful. I love that project. I think what you're doing with this podcast is wonderful. Community is one of the antidotes to what we're experiencing in this country right now, is finding community, building community. And that's exactly what you're doing. And the people who are not afraid to do that, those are the real leaders, because again, that is a choice that we can make. We can choose to build a community. And really, politics are local. Our lives are local. How we care for each other. That is, if there's someone in your community who is losing their home or losing their job or can't get insulin for their mother, how are we getting together as a community and caring for those people that are right down the street for us? That is what this moment calls for. I think we were built for this moment. I think our ancestors are cheering us on. And, I know that things like what you're talking about with the tea, even just intentionally pouring yourself a cup of tea is, again, that small is all principle is in effect there, right? Because you're doing this small intentional act that is actually going to have this transformative effect on a lot of other areas of your life, because it's that intention that is really important. So I love that for you. And I'm excited to get the tea. I'm going to be making some and enjoying it.
We'll see you at Shio, but if not, you're going to text me your address and I'm going to drop this baby in the mail. Well, if you come to Shio, I'd love to hand present it to you, but if you can't,
even better. Yeah.
I'll ship this to you, because this is a cup of soul.
Oh, I can tell. I can tell.
A sister had this in San Francisco. I provided gift boxes for the awardees. I went to a gala celebrating Black equity, diversity, and inclusion professionals and others. And I gifted each of them in acknowledgement of their contributions with this baby. This sister told me, I just poured myself a cup of soul. I didn't even know I was going to be blessed like that. So I make these with my hands and with sheer love.
Yes.
Right? Like, if you've ever had my cooking, if you've ever had my tea, those are things that I do not play about. Etutu Apothecary and Tea Room. www.etutuapothecary.com. I will send you this one, but if you look on there and you see something else you might want to try, I'm happy to do that. But I know you would enjoy this if you like spice, if you like a little clove, a little, not overpacked. If you like sweet potato pie, you'll love this.
I love tea. I love all kinds of tea. I think the art of making tea, of pouring, all of the things, it's just such again, it's that wonderful intentional principle that you can manifest very simply just by making yourself a cup of tea.
Absolutely.
And change your life, so I love it.
And we, through Etutu Apothecary, are reimagining the space of, tea, deconstructing the narratives held around the ceremony of preparing tea and consuming tea, because there's some little known stories around
decolonizing.
Exactly. And that's a whole nother episode, but we are decolonizing that ceremony, right?
It's time to decolonize everything.
we're shifting that narrative, right, and giving honor to its rightful owners.
Yes, and that is an act of resistance, right? That is an act of resistance, because that's
absolutely
what a lot of what's going on right now is a reaction to. And so by reclaiming that, that's a very powerful, I think, way to live and a statement to make. And again, it's that taking those small things, they're not small at all, because when you embody that in how you are carrying on your life, that has a ripple effect out around you. So yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you again for stopping by. I hope to see you at Shio. If not, just expect your tea in the mail, and I will see you good people out there. We're not doing every week, That's a lot, but we gonna try to do, you know, at least 2 episodes a month because it's important to me and it's also important to you all out there. So you can count on me for discussions designed to help us navigate things, right? I said things because I'm talking all the things, whether it's health, whether it's wellness, whether it's breaking up with a toxic job, whether it's breaking up with a toxic other. You know, it's about prioritizing your wellness. And that is the lens through which my pedagogy and approach to fundraising is really about. I want to be well and I want folks to be well, right?
Yes.
Because you can't do your best work if you're not well. You know what I'm saying? And what I mean by best work is on yourself. Okay.
Yes.
I want folks working on themselves because I'm working on myself and it has made me a better executive, a better professional, a better parent, a better daughter. And that's what I want for my viewers. So, again, thank you, my beautiful sister friend, for
Thank
stopping
you.
by. And, folks, wait a minute. Y'all know I'm not the best with this tech stuff. Look, I'm trying to get back to my here we go. And folks, just like that, we're out of here.
Thank you, Kia. Namaste.
Namaste.
You in a position very few people have been in. Now we on the money mission. We on the money mission. If they didn't listen, then they didn't have the vision. Cool, we on the money mission. We on the money mission. Get your money up, money up, money up, money up, money up. Get your money up, money up, money up, money up, money up. Get your money up, money up, money up, money up, money up. Get your You in a position very few people have